At midnight, the new Duchess of Braemere entered the old Duchess's bedroom, carrying a silver knife. She did not intend to harm anyone. She intended to cut the title from her own skin. Lady Seraphine Vale stood before the long mirror in the north chamber, breathing so quickly that the candles trembled in her reflection. Around her neck rested the ceremonial ribbon Duke Alistair Marrow had fastened there only 6 weeks earlier. A strip of black velvet, a diamond clasp, the silver crest of Braemere. The court had applauded when he placed it upon her. Seraphine had smiled at the woman she was replacing. Now she slid the knife beneath the ribbon and sawed through it with shaking hands. The velvet fell to the carpet. The crest struck the floor with a sharp metallic sound. Behind her, the bedroom door opened. Seraphine spun around. No one was there. Only a white envelope lay on the threshold. Her name had been written across it in dark ink. Not Lady Seraphine. Not Your Grace. Just one sentence. The third bell will ring tomorrow. She stared down the empty corridor. Who is there? Silence. Every lamp beyond the bedroom had been extinguished. Seraphine stepped into the passage and nearly slipped. The marble floor was covered with white rose petals. They formed a path towards the sealed western staircase, the staircase that had belonged exclusively to the former Duchess. The staircase no servant had used since she left. Seraphine backed into the bedroom and slammed the door. 6 weeks earlier, she would have laughed at anyone who claimed she could be frightened by flowers and an envelope. 6 weeks earlier, she believed victory had a shape. It looked like a diamond crest around her throat. It sounded like a hall full of nobles applauding while Duchess Elara Marrow was ordered to surrender her seat. It tasted like the wine Alistair raised after declaring that Braemere would finally be free from his wife's joyless control. Seraphine had waited years for that moment. She had not understood that everyone in the hall was applauding for a different reason. Some applauded the Duke. Some applauded the scandal. Some applauded because they were afraid not to. But not one person applauded because they believed Seraphine had won. The following morning, she summoned the palace steward. Mr. Fenwick arrived, carrying 3 ledgers and wearing the same unreadable expression he had worn since Elara's departure. Seraphine threw the envelope onto the breakfast table. Who entered my corridor last night? No one, Your Grace. Do not lie to me. I have no reason to. Someone placed this outside my door. Fenwick looked at the writing. For the first time, his composure weakened. Only slightly. But Seraphine saw it. You recognize the hand. No, you do. I recognize the message. Seraphine gripped the table. What third bell? Fenwick closed the ledger in front of him. You should ask the Duke. I am asking you, and I am advising you to ask your husband. He is not my husband yet. The words landed more heavily than she intended. Fenwick's eyes moved towards the discarded ceremonial ribbon lying near the hearth. No, he said quietly, he is not. Seraphine hated the way the servant spoke to her. Always obedient, always correct, always leaving one sentence unfinished. Duke Alistair had promised their marriage would take place as soon as the Royal Council approved the dissolution of his union with Elara. 6 weeks had passed. No approval had arrived. Yet Alistair had moved Seraphine into the Duchess's apartments, given her control of the household, and ordered everyone to address her by Elara's title. It had seemed bold at first. Romantic, even. Now Seraphine understood what it truly was. A performance. One that depended upon no one examining the stage too closely. She reached for the first ledger. What requires my attention? Fenwick opened it. The eastern tenants are refusing the new rents. Remove them. They cannot be removed. Why? Duchess Elara granted them protected leases. Then cancel the leases. The leases are secured by the Crown Agricultural Office. Seraphine pushed the ledger away. Next. The palace musicians have not been paid. Pay them. The household entertainment account is empty. Use another account. The other accounts are restricted. By whom? Fenwick did not answer. Seraphine already knew. Ilara. He turned to another page. The winter food contracts expire at sunset. Renew them. The merchants will only renew at the prices Duchess Ilara negotiated. Then give them those prices. They will not accept them from you. Seraphine's head snapped up. Why not? Because the agreements were personal. What does that mean? It means the merchants trusted her. I hold the Duchess's seal. Fenwick looked towards the black velvet ribbon. You hold a seal. Seraphine rose so suddenly that the chair struck the floor. You forget your place. No, my lady, I remember it precisely. He gathered the ledgers. That was the problem. Everyone in Braemere remembered where they belonged, except Seraphine. By noon, the first disaster arrived. 40 kitchen workers placed their aprons in a neat pile beside the service entrance and walked out of the palace. They did not shout. They did not complain. They simply left. Seraphine confronted the head cook in the courtyard. You cannot abandon your positions. Mrs. Tavel continued fastening her cloak. We have completed our contracts. Your contracts are permanent. They were renewed yearly by Duchess Ilara. I am the Duchess now. Mrs. Tavel looked at her with something close to pity. No, my lady. You are the woman occupying her rooms. Seraphine's hand tightened. I can have you barred from every respectable household in the county. You may try. Mrs. Tavel glanced at the palace windows. But by tonight, there may be no respectable household left here. Seraphine watched the workers disappear through the gates. Within an hour, the laundry staff followed. Then the gardeners. Then the carriage attendants. Each group left behind a sealed envelope. Every envelope contained the same sentence. The second bell rings at sunset. At 4 o'clock, Seraphine entered Alistair's private study without knocking. He stood over a table covered with letters. When he saw her, he quickly swept them into a drawer. What are you hiding? Estate matters. The servants are leaving. They will return. The kitchen is empty. Hire replacements. From where? Every household agency in Thornmere has refused. Alistair poured himself a drink. They are loyal to Ilara. It will pass. And the bells? His hand stopped above the glass. Seraphine saw it. You know what they mean. Superstitious nonsense. Fenwick knows. The servants know. Even the merchants know. Alistair turned towards the window. Do not concern yourself with it. You placed me in her position. Everything concerning the Duchess concerns me. His expression sharpened. I gave you her position because you said you could manage it. I can manage it if people obey. Ilara never required obedience. Seraphine stared at him. The sentence had escaped before he could stop it. What did she require? Alistair drank without answering. Seraphine moved towards the drawer where he had hidden the letters. He blocked her. Move. No. Are they from the Royal Council? No. From Ilara? His silence was answer enough. Seraphine's stomach tightened. You told me she had accepted exile. She has. Then why is she writing to you? She is not. Seraphine pushed past him and opened the drawer. Inside lay 12 unopened envelopes. All bore the same seal, a white rose pressed into grey wax. Ilara's seal. Seraphine reached for the first. Alistair seized her wrist. Leave them. Why have you not opened them? Because she wants me to. What could she possibly write that frightens you this much? Alistair released her. For one terrible moment, the confident Duke vanished. Beneath the fine coat and polished voice stood a man who looked exhausted, trapped, and far older than he had 6 weeks earlier. She is not writing to me, he said. Then to whom? Alistair looked directly at Seraphine. To you. A deep bell rang across the estate. The sound rolled through the windows and into the study. Once. Twice. Every clock in the room stopped. Seraphine turned towards the distant western tower. The bell had not been used in 16 years. "What happens after the third bell?" she whispered. Alistair lowered his voice. "Braemere chooses its Duchess." Seraphine laughed nervously. "Braemere is an estate. It chooses nothing. That is what I once believed." He opened a hidden compartment beneath his desk and removed a narrow document bound with blue cord. The paper was older than either of them. At the top was the royal crest. Beneath it appeared the names of every duchess who had governed Braemere for the previous 200 years. Seraphine found Ilara's name near the bottom. Directly beneath it was an empty line. Waiting. "What is this?" "The Continuance Charter." "I have never heard of it." "You were not meant to." She scanned the faded writing. The language was formal, but the meaning was clear. Braemere's fortune did not belong entirely to the Duke. The trading houses, village trusts, harbour revenues and domestic estates had been bound generations earlier to the office of the Duchess. Not the Duke's chosen companion, not the woman occupying the palace, the lawful Duchess recognised by the Charter's appointed witnesses. Seraphine looked up slowly. "You told me everything would become ours." "It will." "How?" "When the council approves the dissolution, we marry and your name is entered." "And until then?" Alistair said nothing. Seraphine read further. If the recognised Duchess was removed without surrendering her authority, the Charter allowed 3 formal bells. The first suspended household agreements. The second released workers and merchants from their obligations. The third transferred all Duchess-controlled holdings beyond the Duke's reach until a lawful successor was accepted. Seraphine felt the room tilt beneath her. Ilara never surrendered. She gave me the seal. The Charter says the seal is meaningless without her written declaration. She was supposed to sign it. Did she? Alistair looked away. Seraphine's voice broke. Did she? No. The truth entered the room with brutal simplicity. Seraphine had not inherited Ilara's power. She had been placed where Ilara's power used to be, a decorative figure at the center of a collapsing estate. You knew this could happen. I believed she would reconsider. You humiliated her before the entire court. She loved Braemere. No, Seraphine whispered. You believed she loved it more than she respected herself. Alistair's eyes hardened. Mind your words. Or what? You will replace me as well. He said nothing, and that silence frightened her more than anger would have. At dusk, Seraphine returned to her chamber. The palace was unnaturally quiet. No servants waited in the corridors. No music came from the galleries. Even the clocks remained frozen at the exact moment the second bell had rung. On her pillow lay another envelope. This one was sealed with a white rose. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a map of the palace. A red line led from her bedroom to the sealed west wing. Beneath the map, Ilara had written, You wanted my life. Before the third bell, you must learn why I was desperate to escape it. Seraphine should have gone to Alistair. Instead, she took a lamp and followed the marked route. The west wing smelled of dust and closed rooms. Covered portraits lined the corridor like silent witnesses. At its end stood a black door engraved with the names of former duchesses. Seraphine found Ilara's name at the bottom. Someone had scratched a line through it. Below the damaged name, another had been freshly carved. Seraphine Vale. No, she whispered. She had never entered this wing. No one should have known she was coming. The black door opened by itself. Inside waited a small circular room. The walls were covered with letters. Hundreds of them. Every letter had been addressed to Ilara. Requests for money. Demands from Alistair's creditors. Threats from merchants. Pleas from servants. Petitions from villages. Private instructions from the royal council. For 11 years, every mistake Alistair made had been delivered to Ilara's door. Every debt, every broken promise, every household crisis. She had not ruled Braemere because she craved control. She had stood between the estate and the consequences of her husband's recklessness. On the centre table rested a final ledger. Seraphine opened it. The last entry was dated the night Elara left. If another woman accepts my title before understanding its burden, she will become his shield exactly as I did. He will spend. She will repair. He will promise. She will pay. He will be praised. She will be blamed. Seraphine turned the page. 3 words had been written across it. Unless she refuses. A movement sounded behind her. Seraphine raised the lamp. An elderly woman stepped from the shadows. Lady Honora Wren had served as Elara's private advisor for more than a decade. Everyone believed she had left Braemere with the former Duchess. "What are you doing here?" Seraphine demanded. "Waiting for you. Did you carve my name into that door?" "No." "Then who did?" Honora looked towards the walls. "The witnesses." "What witnesses?" "The people whose signatures can recognize or reject the next Duchess." Seraphine's mouth went dry. "How many are there?" 7. "Where are they?" 6 have already left the estate. "And the 7th? Honora placed a folded letter on the table. "Elara." Seraphine stared at it. "What does she want?" "She wants nothing from you." "Then why send these messages?" "To give you the choice she was never given." Honora pointed towards the distant tower. "Tomorrow night, the 3rd bell will ring. When it does, Braemere's trading income, domestic funds, and protected lands will pass into suspension. For how long? Until Elara returns or formally recognizes another woman." Seraphine felt a cold wave of understanding. The merchants would leave. The servants would not return. The Royal Council would discover the debts, and when Braemere collapsed, Alistair would place the blame upon the woman sitting in the Duchess's chair. Upon her. "How do I stop it?" "You cannot." "There must be a way." "There is one." Honora's answer came softly. "Find Elara before the 3rd bell and persuade her to take back everything you stole." Seraphine looked towards the carved door. For 6 weeks, she had worn Elara's gowns, slept in her chamber, and issued orders from her desk. She had called it victory. Now she finally understood why Elara had walked away without begging. She had not been defeated. She had escaped. A door slammed somewhere in the corridor. Honora extinguished the lamp. Darkness swallowed the room. "Someone followed you," she whispered. Heavy footsteps approached. Alistair's voice echoed through the west wing. "Seraphine?" Honora pushed a key into her hand. "Go through the servants' passage." "Where does it lead?" "To the old road." "And Elara?" Honora leaned close. "She lives at Greythorn House, beyond the Vale of Orwyn." Seraphine moved towards the hidden door, then stopped. "What happens if I fail?" The footsteps grew louder. Honora's expression became grave. "When the 3rd bell rings, Alistair will need someone to sacrifice to his creditors." She looked directly into Seraphine's eyes. "And he did not replace Elara because he loved you. He replaced her because he believed you would be easier to blame." By dawn, Seraphine Vale had lost one shoe, torn the hem of her gown, and discovered that fear could keep a woman moving long after exhaustion should have stopped her. Greythorn House stood beyond the Vale of Orwyn, hidden between bare hills and a line of ancient cedar trees. It was smaller than Braemere Palace. Quieter. No crest decorated its gate. No guards announced visitors. No servants hurried forward to take Seraphine's cloak. Yet the moment she saw the house, she understood something Alistair had never understood. Elara had not been exiled there. She had chosen it. Warm light shone from the lower windows. Smoke rose from the chimneys. The surrounding fields had been cleared and divided into neat sections where workers were already preparing the soil for winter grain. Everything looked ordered, protected, alive. Seraphine climbed the stone steps and struck the door. No answer. She knocked again. "I know you are inside." A curtain moved in the nearest window. Seraphine pressed both hands against the door. "Elara, please, the third bell rings tonight." The door opened. A man stood on the other side. He was tall, silver-haired, and dressed in the dark green coat of the Royal Land Commission. Seraphine recognized him immediately. Lord Garrick Ormond, the Crown's senior investigator of noble estates. The visitor Honora had warned her about. His presence at Greythorn could mean only one thing. Elara had reported Braemere. "Lady Seraphine," Garrick said calmly. She stepped backwards. "You know who I am? Most of Thornmere knows who you are. Where is Elara?" "Duchess Elara is occupied." The title struck Seraphine harder than an insult. At Braemere, everyone had addressed her as Duchess under Alistair's orders. Here, one of the Crown's most powerful officials had used the title for Elara without hesitation. "I must speak with her. You must return to Braemere." "I cannot. You arrived without a carriage, escort or proper clothing. You certainly can. The Charter will suspend the estate tonight." "I am aware. Then you know what will happen." "Yes." Seraphine lowered her voice. "Alistair will lose everything." Garrick studied her. "You say that as though he does not deserve to." Seraphine felt a flicker of anger. "I did not travel through the night to defend him." "Then why are you here?" Before she could answer, a woman spoke from the hall behind him. "Let her enter." Garrick moved aside. Elara Marrow stood at the end of the passage, wearing a plain blue dress with her dark hair pinned loosely at her neck. No diamonds, no ceremonial ribbon, no servants holding her train. Still, Seraphine had never seen her look more powerful. At the winter assembly, Elara had seemed pale and silent beneath the weight of public humiliation. Now her face was calm, not the calmness of defeat. The calmness of someone who had already made the decision everyone else was still struggling to understand. Seraphine crossed the threshold. Elara led her into a sunlit morning room, where documents were spread across a long oak table. Maps of Braemere, lists of workers, copies of merchant agreements, and in the centre, the continuance charter. Seraphine looked at Garrick. "You came to seize the estate." "No," he said. "I came to determine who has been stealing from it." Elara closed the door. "You have until sunset to say what brought you here." Seraphine stared at her. "You know why. I know what Alistair wants. I do not yet know what you want. I want you to stop the third bell." "No." The answer came without anger, without hesitation. Seraphine blinked. "You have not heard me. I heard you clearly. Braemere's workers are leaving. The food contracts have ended. The creditors are preparing claims. I know. The northern lands may be taken. They will not." Seraphine glanced at the maps. "What have you done?" "What I should have done years ago." Elara pulled a document from the table. "Every protected village, harbour trust, and agricultural lease has already been separated from Alistair's personal debts." "That is impossible." "It was difficult, not impossible. The Charter gave me the authority." Seraphine's breathing slowed. Braemere would not collapse, not all of it. The villages would survive, the workers would remain protected, the merchants would retain their agreements. Only the palace and Alistair's personal holdings were in danger. The third bell was not going to destroy Braemere. It was going to expose him. Seraphine stepped closer. "You planned this before you left." Elara's eyes held hers. "I prepared it for 11 years. The room fell silent. Seraphine remembered the letters covering the West Wing walls. Every mistake Alistair had made, every debt Elara had paid, every promise she had been forced to keep. You could have ruined him at any time. Yes. Why did you wait? Because thousands of people depended on the estate. You protected him for them. I protected them from him." Seraphine looked towards the window. All those years, Alistair had presented himself as a generous duke. He had hosted celebrations, announced improvements, and accepted gratitude from villagers who never knew his wife was quietly finding the money for everything he promised. And now, Seraphine asked, now they no longer need him. Lord Garrick moved towards the table. Once the third bell rings, the Crown will recognize the division. Duke Alistair will retain the palace, his private lands and every debt attached to them. Seraphine's throat tightened. And the title of Duchess. Ilara looked at her. It remains mine until I surrender it lawfully. You left. I left the palace. I did not abandon my responsibilities. Seraphine shook her head. You sent me the letters. I sent you one letter. The warnings, the maps, the envelopes were not mine. The room seemed to contract around her. What? I wrote only the message you found in the West Wing. You did not send the countdown. No. You did not place the rose petals. No. You did not carve my name into the door. Ilara's face changed. For the first time, real concern entered her expression. Someone carved your name. Seraphine realized she had made a mistake. She had assumed Ilara was controlling every movement at Braemere. But someone else had known the charter. Someone else had wanted her in the West Wing. And that person had followed her through the palace. The letters said the third bell would ring. Ilara exchanged a look with Garrick. What color was the wax? He asked. Grey, with a white rose. Ilara crossed the room and opened a small box. Inside lay several sticks of grey sealing wax and a silver stamp shaped like a rose. One space in the box was empty. My private seal was stolen before I left Braemere, she said. Who had access? 3 people, Honora, Fenwick, and Alistair. Seraphine's mind returned to the dark room in the West Wing. Honora waiting among the letters. Honora directing her to Greythorn. Honora claiming that Alistair intended to sacrifice her. You trusted Honora, Seraphine said. I did. Did? Ilara did not answer immediately. Honora disappeared before sunrise. A chill passed through Seraphine. She sent me here. Then she wanted you away from Braemere. Why? Lord Garrick unfolded a palace floor plan. Perhaps because something is supposed to happen there before the third bell. Seraphine moved to the table. What? Garrick pointed to the western tower. The bell cannot ring by itself. It must be activated by one of the charter's witnesses. You said 6 had left. They did. And Ilara is here. Yes. Then who can ring it? Ilara's expression grew cold. Honora served as my appointed proxy. Seraphine stepped back. Honora had not been helping her escape. She had removed the one woman whose presence might interfere with whatever she planned to do. I have to return. Garrick blocked the door. You will not reach Braemere before evening on foot. Then give me a horse. No. Seraphine stared at him. Why not? Because we still do not know whether you are involved. Involved in what? He laid another document on the table. A bank transfer bearing Seraphine's signature. The amount was enormous. The payment had been withdrawn from the household reserve 2 days after Ilara left. Seraphine picked it up. I never signed this. The bank accepted it. This is not my handwriting. But it uses the seal you were given. Seraphine looked at Ilara. Alistair told me the household accounts were restricted. They are, Ilara said, unless someone presents the Duchess's seal together with a witness authorization. Honora, or someone using her name. Garrick placed 3 more transfers beside the first. Each bore Seraphine's signature. Each moved money from protected funds into an account held by a company she had never heard of. Vale Holdings, her own family name. The evidence made it appear as though Seraphine had accepted the title only to steal from Braemere. This is what Alistair meant, she whispered. Ilara watched her carefully. What did he say? That the letters were addressed to me, that Braemere chooses its Duchess. He knew you would enter the West Wing. Seraphine felt sick. He wanted me to find the charter. Or someone wanted you to believe he did. Lord Garrick gathered the transfers. If these documents are presented after the third bell, the Crown may conclude that Lady Seraphine attempted to strip the estate before its suspension. I did nothing. Evidence does not become weak simply because the accused denies it. Seraphine turned towards Ilara. You must come back. No. You are the only person who can prove I could not access those funds. Returning to the palace will not erase the transfers, but you can stop Honora. If Honora is acting alone, Seraphine understood the unspoken possibility. What if Alistair and Honora were working together? One would ring the bell, the other would reveal the false evidence. Seraphine would be accused of stealing the missing money, and Alistair could claim he had been deceived by a manipulative woman while presenting himself as another victim. The same pattern. He would act. A woman would carry the blame. Seraphine lowered herself into a chair. I thought he chose me. Ilara's expression remained guarded. He did. Not because he loved me. No. Because he thought I was foolish. Because he thought you wanted the title enough not to question what came with it. Seraphine looked up sharply. You despise me. I did. The honesty stung. Ilara continued. I despised the way you smiled when he humiliated me. I despised how easily you believed every lie he told about me. I despised you for mistaking another woman's suffering for an opportunity. Seraphine swallowed. And now? Now I see a woman sitting where I once sat, finally realizing the chair was never a throne. Ilara turned towards the window. It was a shield. For several seconds neither woman spoke. Then hooves sounded outside. A carriage entered the Greythorn courtyard at reckless speed. Garrick moved towards the window. 2 palace attendants jumped down. Between them, they carried Mr. Fenwick. The steward's coat was torn. His face was grey with exhaustion. Ilara hurried into the hall as the men helped him inside. Fenwick, what happened? He pulled a small metal object from his pocket. The missing rose seal. I found this in Duke Alistair's private desk. Seraphine stared at it. Then he sent the letters. No. Fenwick struggled to breathe. The desk had been forced open. Someone wanted the seal to be found there. Honora, Ilara asked. Fenwick shook his head. Lady Honora is gone. So is the continuance charter from the palace archive. Garrick's voice hardened. The copy here is sufficient. Not if she has the founding page. Ilara went still. Seraphine looked between them. What founding page? The page naming the original witnesses, Ilara answered. And the clause that allows the charter to be amended. Fenwick placed both hands on the table. Honora does not intend to ring the third bell and suspend Braemere. Then what does she intend? Seraphine demanded. He looked directly at her. She intends to name a new lawful Duchess. Seraphine glanced at Ilara. That is impossible without Ilara's approval. Unless Honora proves the current Duchess violated the charter. Garrick looked towards the forged transfers. If the stolen money is connected to Ilara, she could be removed, Seraphine finished. Fenwick nodded. And if Seraphine is blamed for the theft, she cannot be recognized either. 2 women disgraced with one scheme. The real Duchess accused of misusing protected funds. The replacement accused of stealing what remained. Honora would clear the way for a third woman. But who? Seraphine asked. Fenwick reached inside his coat and removed a folded announcement. It had already been printed for distribution throughout Thornmere. At the top appeared the Braemere crest. Beneath it were the words, By authority of the Continuance Charter, Lady Honora Wren is hereby recognized as Guardian Duchess of Braemere. Seraphine read it twice. She wants the title. No, Ilara said slowly. She wants the estate. Fenwick shook his head. You still do not understand. His eyes moved towards the clock. Noon had already passed. The third bell is no longer the danger. What is? Garrick asked. Fenwick's answer silenced the room. Honora has called a public assembly at Braemere Palace. She will present the forged accounts before every charter witness she has secretly recalled. And when they accept her claim, the palace, the protected lands, and every trust Ilara saved will pass into Honora's control. Seraphine moved towards the door. Then we stop her. Ilara did not follow. Seraphine turned back. What are you waiting for? The truth. We know the truth. No, we know Honora forged your name. We do not know why. She wants Braemere. Ilara's gaze shifted to the announcement. Honora served me for 12 years. She could have betrayed me many times. Why wait until Alistair replaced me? Fenwick lowered his eyes. Because he knew the answer. Ilara noticed. What have you not told us? The steward reached into his coat one final time. He removed a miniature portrait. The woman in the image was young, with dark eyes and a white rose pinned to her dress. Seraphine had never seen her before. Ilara had. Her face drained of colour. Where did you get this? Honora's rooms. Garrick examined the portrait. Who is she? Ilara's voice became almost inaudible. Alistair's mother. Seraphine frowned. The former Duchess. No. Ilara turned the miniature over. A name had been written on the back. Honora Wren. The room became silent. Lady Honora was not merely Ilara's advisor. She was Alistair's mother. The woman everyone believed had died before he inherited Braemere. And if the portrait was genuine, Honora's claim was not based only on forged documents. It was based on blood. The carriage reached Braemere as the palace bells began to move. Not ring, move. From the open windows of the western tower came the deep groan of ancient ropes being pulled into place. The sound rolled across the courtyard like a warning. Ilara stepped down first. Seraphine followed, still wearing the torn gown in which she had fled the palace. Lord Garrick and Mr. Fenwick came behind them, carrying the forged transfers, the stolen seal, and the printed announcement naming Honora as Guardian Duchess. Hundreds of people filled the palace steps. Tenant leaders, merchants, household servants, magistrates from every district in Thornmere. The charter witnesses stood beneath the great archway, wearing white ceremonial ribbons. At the centre of them all was Lady Honora Wren. She wore black, not mourning black, triumphant black. A narrow silver chain rested across her shoulders, and from it hung the oldest crest of Braemere, the crest used before the Ashcombe and Marrow families had joined their estates. Beside her stood Duke Alistair. His expression changed when he saw Ilara. For one brief moment, fear broke through his polished calm. Then he smiled. "My dear," he said, "you returned." Ilara climbed the steps slowly. "No, Alistair." She stopped before him. "I came to make certain you cannot use my return as another lie." A murmur passed through the crowd. Honora's eyes moved to Seraphine. "You were told to remain at Greythorn." Seraphine almost laughed. The command was so natural, so familiar, that it revealed what Honora had always believed, that every woman could be directed if she was frightened enough. "You sent me there so you could accuse me in my absence," Seraphine said. "I sent you away to protect you. You forged my signature. I created a path by which you might survive. You created evidence that could send me before the royal court." Honora's expression did not change. "Survival often requires sacrifice." Seraphine glanced at Alistair. "And I suppose you had already decided who would be sacrificed." Alistair stepped forward. "This spectacle is unnecessary. We are all here to save Braemere." "No," Ilara replied, "you are here to save yourself." The western bell rope tightened. One of the charter witnesses raised his hand. "The public assembly has begun. Under the continuance charter, Lady Honora Wren has challenged Duchess Ilara Marrow's authority on the grounds of financial misconduct and abandonment of duty." "Abandonment?" Ilara repeated. Honora lifted a collection of documents. "You left the palace." "I left my husband. You suspended contracts to prevent him from destroying protected funds. You abandoned the Duchess's rooms. The charter does not bind the Duchess to a bedroom. A few servants lowered their faces to hide smiles. Honora's voice sharpened. You transferred Braymere's villages and commercial trusts beyond the Duke's authority. I protected them under the powers granted to my office. You acted without his consent. The charter does not require it. For the first time, uncertainty moved through the witnesses. Honora had expected Ilara to arrive ashamed. She had expected a woman still weakened by public rejection. Instead, Ilara stood before the county speaking with the confidence of someone who knew every line of the law being used against her. Alistair intervened. This is precisely the problem. My wife has treated Braymere as her private kingdom. Ilara looked at him. When the Western Bridge failed, who negotiated the repairs? He said nothing. When 3 harvests underperformed, who prevented the villages from losing their leases? Silence. When your private borrowing threatened the northern lands, who restructured the debt? Alistair's jaw tightened. You exceeded your place. No, I occupied the place you abandoned every time responsibility became less pleasant than applause. The crowd murmured again. Honora lifted the forged transfers. These records prove that Duchess Ilara authorized the removal of protected money after leaving Braymere. Lord Garrick stepped forward. They prove no such thing. The royal crest on his coat silenced the gathering. He took the papers from Honora and held them up. The transfers carry Lady Seraphine Vale's signature. Honora's mouth curved slightly. Then Lady Seraphine stole the money. Seraphine felt every eye turn towards her. This was the moment she had feared, the moment when the ambitious replacement became the easy villain. 6 weeks earlier, she might have begged Alistair to defend her. Now she looked directly at him. You told me the household funds were restricted. They were. You told me only Ilara could access them. At that time, yes. You knew these documents existed. Alistair gave no answer. Seraphine continued. You knew I would be blamed. Honora stepped between them. My son was deceived by you. There it was. My son. The words echoed beneath the archway. The crowd shifted. Honora had hidden the truth for years. Now she claimed it openly, because she believed the assembly was already hers. Ilara produced the miniature portrait. Your identity is confirmed. Honora raised her chin. I am Honora Ashcombe, lawful widow of the late Duke Percival and mother of Duke Alistair. Then why were you declared dead? Alistair answered. For her protection. From whom? He hesitated. Honora did not. From the council that wished to remove my son from the succession. Fenwick stepped forward. That is not what happened. Every face turned towards the steward. For 28 years, Fenwick had served Braymere quietly. He had carried documents, witnessed agreements, and remembered the things powerful families preferred to forget. He unfolded an old statement. Lady Honora was removed after attempting to transfer village trust income into her private account. Honora's eyes hardened. That accusation was false. The inquiry was signed by 5 magistrates. They were enemies of my husband, and the repayment order. Honora said nothing. Fenwick lifted another page. Duke Percival preserved Alistair's inheritance by declaring that Honora had died abroad. She accepted exile in exchange for avoiding prosecution. Alistair looked at her. A crack appeared in his certainty. You told me father invented the charges because he feared your influence. He feared me, Honora replied. Because you stole from the estate? Because I understood what belonged to us. A murmur swept through the assembly. Honora's face changed. The patient advisor disappeared. In her place stood the woman who had spent decades believing Braymere had been taken from her. The estate belonged to my husband, she declared, then to my son. Yet for generations, weak men allowed merchants, tenants and servants to control the wealth through this absurd charter. The charter protects them, Ilara said. It imprisons the family. It prevents the family from treating thousands of lives as private possessions. Honora looked around at the workers filling the courtyard. They exist because Braemere permits them to. No, Ilara answered. Braemere exists because they sustain it. Applause rose from the lower steps. Honora raised her voice. You think she values you. She reorganized the estate because she loved power. She protected your wages because your loyalty made her untouchable. Mrs. Tavel, the head cook, stepped out from the crowd. No, my lady? Honora stared at her. Mrs. Tavel removed her white ribbon. Duchess Ilara protected my position when my husband died, and every other household refused to employ a widow with 3 children. The harbour master came forward. She kept our storage rights when the Duke promised them to foreign merchants. A tenant leader joined them. She froze rents after the failed harvest. One by one, people stepped from the crowd. Not because Ilara had ordered them, because they remembered. Seraphine watched the scene in silence. She had once mistaken quiet loyalty for fear. Now she saw what real authority looked like. It did not require musicians. It did not demand applause. It lived in what people chose to defend when no reward had been promised. Honora turned towards the witnesses. The assembly must proceed. Ilara abandoned the palace, and the replacement Duchess stole protected funds. Neither woman is fit to govern Braemere. Lord Garrick placed the stolen rose seal on the stone table. The transfers were authorized with this seal and the signature of a charter proxy. Honora's hand moved slightly towards her sleeve. Garrick noticed. So I ordered the Royal Bank to examine the originals before coming here. He produced a folded report. The witness authorization was written in your hand. Honora did not move. The funds were transferred to Vale Holdings, Garrick continued, but that company was registered 14 years ago. Seraphine frowned. I was still a child. Exactly. He looked at Honora. The name was not chosen because Lady Seraphine owned the company. It was chosen because you had already begun searching for a woman whose family name could conceal it. Ilara understood first. You did not select Seraphine after Alistair fell in love with her. Honora smiled bitterly. My son never fell in love with her. Seraphine flinched, but she did not look away. Honora continued. I found her. I arranged her invitation to court. I placed her beside Alistair at every dinner. I taught her what to say about Ilara. I made him believe his dissatisfaction was desire. Alistair stared at his mother. You said she would free me. She was supposed to remove Ilara from the palace. You said after the charter passed to you, I would control the estate. You would have retained the title. The title? Alistair finally understood. Honora had never intended to share Braemere with him. She had used her own son exactly as he had used both women. Seraphine looked at him. You replaced Ilara because your mother instructed you to. His silence answered her. And you told yourself it was love, because admitting the truth would mean acknowledging you had never made a decision of your own. Alistair's face reddened. Be careful. Why? Will you blame me for that too? The first bell sounded. Not the third. The first. Everyone turned towards the tower. Honora's appointed bellkeeper pulled the rope again. The witnesses raised their ribbons. The challenge must be decided, their leader announced. Duchess Ilara, will you defend your title? Ilara looked towards the palace. For 11 years, she had protected its rooms, repaired its failures, and carried burdens that should never have belonged to one person. She could keep the title. The witnesses were ready to support her. The workers would remain. The merchants would renew their contracts. Alistair's debts would be separated from the protected estate. She could return to the chair Seraphine had once envied. But Seraphine saw something in her expression. Ilara did not want the chair. She wanted what came after it. I will not defend the title, Ilara said. The courtyard erupted in shocked voices. Alistair stepped towards her. Then Honora wins. No. Ilara placed the continuance charter on the stone table. The challenge allows the lawful Duchess to propose an amendment before surrendering authority. Honora's confidence vanished. You cannot amend the founding clause without the original page. Fenwick smiled faintly. The page you stole was a copy. He removed a thin sheet of parchment from inside the oldest ledger. The original has remained in the steward's custody for 86 years. Ilara laid her amendment beside it. I propose that the office of Duchess no longer control Braymere's protected lands. The witnesses stared at her. The villages, harbour trusts, domestic funds and agricultural revenues will pass into an independent council composed of elected tenants, workers, merchants and magistrates. Alistair's voice rose. You cannot give away my estate. I am not giving away what you never owned. And the palace. You may keep it. The answer stopped him. Braymere Palace was beautiful. It was also drowning in his personal debts. Without the protected income, it was nothing more than an enormous monument he could not afford to maintain. Ilara turned to Seraphine. The charter requires a second claimant to support the amendment. Every eye shifted towards her. Seraphine had dreamed of hearing herself recognized as a claimant. Now the word meant something entirely different. If she refused, she might still bargain for Honora's favor. If she agreed, she would surrender any possibility of becoming Duchess. The title, the crest, the rooms, everything she had once believed would prove her worth. She removed the broken black ribbon from her cloak and placed it on the charter. I support the amendment. Honora stepped forward. You foolish girl, without this title you are nothing. Seraphine looked at her calmly. That is what you needed me to believe. She signed. The charter witnesses added their names one after another. When the last signature was completed, the tower rope was released. The third bell never rang. It would never ring again. By nightfall, Lady Honora was taken into royal custody to face charges of forgery, fraud, and unlawful seizure of protected funds. Alistair was not arrested. His punishment was quieter. The royal court recognized Ilara's separation from him and assigned every private debt to his remaining holdings. Braymere Palace was placed under assessment, and most of its valuable contents were sold to satisfy creditors. The man who had once believed women existed to protect him found himself alone in a palace where no servant wished to remain. He asked Ilara for one final meeting. She refused. He asked Seraphine. She sent back the black ribbon. Within 1 year, the palace became a public school and administrative hall for the surrounding districts. The north chamber, where Seraphine had cut the ceremonial crest from her throat, was converted into a library. The west wing became an archive. The letters once hidden there were preserved as evidence of what happened when duty was praised in public, but forced silently upon women behind closed doors. Seraphine did not remain in Thornmere. She returned to her mother's modest estate in Belhaven and spent 2 years helping women understand the contracts they were encouraged to sign without reading. Some people never forgave her for replacing Ilara. She did not ask them to. Redemption, she learned, was not convincing everyone that she had become better. It was choosing better even when no one was watching. As for Ilara, she remained at Greythorn House. She became the first elected chair of the Braymere Council, but she refused every attempt to give her another noble title. On the first anniversary of the charter amendment, Seraphine returned. She found Ilara in the garden, planting white roses beside the stone wall. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Seraphine held out the iron ring of palace keys. I believe these belong in the archive. Ilara looked at them. You kept them. I needed to remember what I once begged you to take back. Ilara accepted the keys. And now? Now I know they were never the victory. Ilara placed them inside a wooden box. No, she said. The victory was learning that you could walk away. The bells of the village chapel rang across the valley. Seraphine looked towards the sound. Do they still frighten you? Ilara smiled. Not anymore. Two women stood beneath the white roses, one who had been replaced and one who had believed replacing her meant winning. Neither wore the Duchess's crest, neither needed it. Because Braemere no longer belonged to the man who inherited its name, the mother who tried to steal its wealth, or the woman chosen to decorate its throne. It belonged to the people who had carried it all along, and for the first time in its history there was no Duchess of Braemere. There were only free women who had finally refused to become shields for someone else's mistakes.